The rain had turned the mountain road into a black mirror by the time Garrett Cross finally saw the cabin through the pines. His hands were numb on the handlebars, his leather jacket soaked through, and every muscle in his body screamed for rest. 3 days on the road, running from a past that wouldn't stay buried, and this place was supposed to be his salvation, his refuge. The one thing his father had left him, that the club couldn't touch. He killed the engine 50 yards out, letting the Harley roll silent through the mud. Old habits, the kind that kept you breathing when half the state wanted you dead. The cabin was dark, except for a single window on the first floor, glowing soft and gold like a promise. Garrett's jaw tightened. He'd paid cash for this property 6 months ago through a lawyer, sight unseen. The deed was clean, the land was remote. No one was supposed to be here. No one. He swung off the bike and pulled the .45 from his belt, thumbing off the safety as he moved through the trees. Water dripped from the branches above, mixing with the sweat on his neck despite the cold. His boots made no sound on the wet pine needles. 20 years with the Hells Angels had taught him how to move like a ghost when he needed to. The front door wasn't locked. It swung open on hinges that barely whispered, and Garrett stepped into warmth that hit him like a physical thing. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. The smell of coffee and something sweet, cinnamon maybe, hung in the air. And then he saw her. She stood in the kitchen doorway, backlit by the amber glow of an oil lamp, and for a moment Garrett forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. Not magazine beautiful. Not the hard-edged beauty of the club girls who hung around the compound. This was something else entirely. Something that made his chest ache with a feeling he'd thought died years ago. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, catching the firelight. She wore an oversized cream sweater that slipped off one bare shoulder, and her eyes, wide, startled, impossibly green, locked onto his with an intensity that rooted him to the spot. Neither of them moved. The gun hung loose in Garrett's hand, forgotten. The rain drummed against the roof, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled through the mountains like a warning from God himself. "Who are you?" Her voice was soft, musical, without a trace of the fear he'd expected, without the fear he deserved. Garrett's throat worked, but no sound came out. He'd faced down rival gangs, cops, men who would have killed him for the patch on his back, but this woman, standing in his cabin like she belonged there more than he ever could, had stolen every word from his tongue. "I could ask you the same thing," he finally managed, his voice rough from disuse and cold. "This is my property." "I know." She didn't move from the doorway, but something shifted in her expression. Not fear, something closer to resignation. "I was hoping you wouldn't come." If you love forbidden love stories where danger meets tenderness, subscribe and don't miss the next chapter of this ride. Garrett holstered the gun slowly, deliberately. "Well, I'm here now, and you're going to tell me why you're living in my cabin." She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes reading him in ways that made him feel exposed, vulnerable. Then she did something he didn't expect. She smiled, small, sad, like she was looking at something broken that she wanted to fix, but knew she couldn't. "Because," she said quietly, "I'm running from the same kind of demons you are." The words hit Garrett like a fist to the gut. He should have thrown her out, should have called whatever local law existed up here and had her removed, should have done anything except what he did next. "What's your name?" "Ilara." She wrapped her arms around herself, and Garrett noticed for the first time how thin she was under that sweater, how her fingers trembled just slightly. "Ilara Hayes." Garrett. He didn't offer his last name, didn't need to. The patch on his jacket, the death's head and wings, told her everything she needed to know about who he was, what he was. "I know," she said again, and this time there was something else in her voice, something that sounded almost like understanding. "I saw your bike, the jacket." She paused. "Your Hells Angels." It wasn't a question. Garrett waited for the fear to come into her eyes then. That always did. Always. But Ilara just looked at him with that same steady, sad gaze and said, "I won't tell anyone you're here if you don't tell anyone I am." The fire popped in the hearth. Rain lashed the windows, and Garrett Cross, who'd spent 20 years building walls so high nothing could reach him, felt the first crack split straight through his armor. "Deal," he heard himself say. Ilara nodded once, then turned back toward the kitchen. "There's coffee," she said over her shoulder. "And I made bread this morning. You look like you haven't eaten in days." She was right. He hadn't. But Garrett stood frozen in that doorway, watching her move through the cabin like she'd been there forever, and felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that told him walking into this place was either the biggest mistake of his life or the only right thing he'd done in years. He wouldn't know which until it was far too late. The thunder rolled again, closer now, and Garrett finally stepped fully inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded, in the quiet of the cabin, like a trap snapping shut. On both of them. The coffee was better than anything Garrett had tasted in months, maybe years. He sat at the rough wooden table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, and watched Ilara move through the kitchen with practiced efficiency. She'd given him bread, still warm, dense and dark with a crust that crackled under his knife, and he'd eaten it without speaking, too hungry and too tired to question the surreal domesticity of the moment. She hadn't asked about the blood on his knuckles, hadn't commented on the way he'd positioned himself with his back to the wall, eyes on both the door and the window. She just moved around him like he was a piece of furniture she'd long since learned to navigate. "How long have you been here?" Garrett finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the better part of 20 minutes. Ilara paused, her hands stilling on the towel she'd been using to dry dishes. 3 months. Maybe 4. I stopped counting after a while. Why? She turned to face him then, and in the lamplight he could see the shadows under her eyes. The kind that came from sleeping light, always ready to run. He recognized them because he'd seen them in his own mirror for years. "You said you wouldn't tell anyone I was here," she said quietly. "Can I trust that to extend to not asking questions I can't answer?" Garrett studied her over the rim of his mug. Every instinct he'd honed over 2 decades told him to press, to find out who she was running from and why, to determine if she was a threat. But something in her eyes, that same bone-deep exhaustion he felt in his own soul, made him nod instead. Fair enough. He drained the last of his coffee. "But if whoever you're running from shows up here, I need to know what I'm dealing with." "They won't." The certainty in her voice was absolute. "No one knows about this place, that's why I chose it." "How'd you even find it?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I'm good with property records and finding places people have forgotten about." She moved back to the table, refilling his mug without asking. "The cabin wasn't on any maps. The deed was filed wrong. It was perfect. Until I showed up." "Until you showed up," she agreed. Then softer. "Why did you? Come here, I mean. If you bought it 6 months ago and never visited?" Garrett's jaw tightened. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady drone against the roof. "Same reason you did. Needed a place no one knew about. And now we both need it." Ilara sat down across from him, cradling her own mug. "That's a problem. Doesn't have to be." The words came out before Garrett could stop them. "Place is big enough for 2. Her eyes snapped to his, surprise flickering across her features. "You don't know me. You don't know me either. Didn't stop you from feeding me." "That's different. Is it?" Garrett leaned back, his leather jacket creaking. "We're both running, we both need this place, and something tells me neither of us is in a position to go back to wherever we came from." He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle between them. "We can help each other, or we can make each other's lives harder. Your choice." Ilara was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug in slow circles. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't trust people anymore." "Good," Garrett said. "Neither do I." Another beat of silence. Then Ilara laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more pain than humor. "This is insane." "Yeah." Garrett felt a grin tug at the corner of his mouth, the first in longer than he could remember. "It is. I get the bedroom. You can have the loft. Deal." She stood gathering the dishes with hands that shook just slightly. Garrett noticed but didn't comment. He was good at reading people. Had to be in his line of work. And everything about Ilara Hayes screamed trauma barely held in check. Whatever she was running from had marked her deep. "I'll get you some blankets," she said, moving toward a closet in the far corner. "It gets cold up there at night." Garrett should have let her go, should have taken the blankets and disappeared into the loft and maintained whatever fragile distance they were pretending to establish. Instead, he found himself standing, crossing the room in 3 long strides and catching her wrist gently before she reached the closet door. She froze, didn't pull away, but every muscle in her body went taut as wire. "Ilara." He kept his voice soft, non-threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you." "I know." But she didn't relax. "That's not what I'm afraid of." Garrett felt his chest constrict. He released her wrist immediately, stepping back to give her space. "What are you afraid of?" She turned then, and the look in her eyes nearly broke something in him. It was a look he'd seen before, in mirrors and in the faces of brothers who'd been in the life too long. The look of someone who'd survived when they shouldn't have and didn't quite know what to do with the borrowed time they'd been given. "That you're real," she whispered. "That this," she gestured vaguely at the cabin, at him, at the fragile piece between them, "is real. And that when I wake up tomorrow, it'll be gone." Garrett had no answer for that, no reassurance that wouldn't sound hollow. So he did the only thing he could. He showed her the truth on his knuckles, split and still bleeding from the fight 3 days ago that had sent him running in the first place. "This is real," he said quietly. "All of it. The good and the bad and everything in between." He held her gaze. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until—" The words died as headlights cut through the rain outside, sweeping across the cabin walls like searchlights. 2 vehicles, maybe 3, coming fast up the mountain road that was supposed to be impassable. Ilara's face went white. "No, no, they can't. They don't know." Garrett was already moving, grabbing his gun from the table and killing the lamp with one swift motion. The cabin plunged into darkness, save for the dying firelight. "Get upstairs. Now." "Garrett." "Now." He'd already reached the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. 3 trucks, black, unmarked, and moving with the kind of purpose that told him everything he needed to know. They weren't here by accident. Behind him he heard Ilara's footsteps on the stairs, fast but quiet. Good. She knew how to move in a crisis. That was something. The trucks stopped 50 yards out, engines cutting simultaneously. Doors opened. 4, no, 5. Figures emerged, silhouettes in the rain. They fanned out with military precision, surrounding the cabin. Garrett's finger found the trigger. His heart rate slowed, dropping into the cold, controlled rhythm of survival. He'd been here before, done this dance more times than he could count, but never with someone else's life on the line. Never with green eyes and dark hair and a voice that sounded like home watching from the darkness above. The first figure stepped into the firelight, bleeding through the window, and Garrett's blood turned to ice in his veins. He knew that face, knew the patch on that jacket. And in that moment he realized with terrible clarity that Ilara wasn't the only one whose past had just caught up to them. His had too. They waited in the darkness for 17 minutes. Garrett counted every second, his breathing controlled, his body coiled tight as he tracked the shadows moving outside through the rain-streaked window. Ilara hadn't made a sound from the loft above, but he could feel her presence like heat against his back. Terrified, waiting, trusting him with her life in a way that made his chest ache. The figures circled the cabin twice, checked the bike, peered through windows with flashlights that cut the darkness into sharp, geometric pieces. Garrett recognized the leader's gait even from a distance. Snake, one of his former brothers from the Las Vegas chapter. A man who'd sworn blood oaths with him, rode beside him through fire and bullets and raids that should have killed them both. A man who'd sell him out for the right price. When the trucks finally pulled away, engines growling back down the mountain, Garrett didn't move, didn't breathe. Old instincts. You wait for the faint within the faint, because that's how they catch you. It was Ilara who finally broke the silence. "Are they gone?" "Yeah." Garrett lowered the gun slowly, his arm aching from holding the same position for so long. "For now." He heard her coming down the stairs, her footsteps soft but urgent. When she reached the bottom, he could just make out her silhouette in the renewed darkness, arms wrapped around herself, shoulders trembling. "They were looking for you," she said. Not a question. "And probably you too. Different people, same problem." Garrett moved to the fireplace, coaxing the dying embers back to life. He needed light, needed to see her face. "We need to talk." "I told you, I know what you told me." He kept his voice gentle, but firm. "And I kept my word, didn't ask questions. But whoever just showed up here brought both our pasts with them, and if we're going to survive what's coming, we need to be straight with each other." The fire caught, orange light spilling back into the room. Ilara stood near the stairs, her face pale but resolute. She'd grabbed a blanket from somewhere, had it wrapped around her shoulders like armor. When she met his eyes, Garrett saw the war happening behind them. Fear versus necessity, secrets versus survival. "You first," she finally said. Fair enough. Garrett sank into the armchair near the fire, suddenly feeling every mile he'd ridden, every year he'd lived. "My name is Garrett Cross, Sergeant-at-Arms for the Hells Angels, Las Vegas chapter." He watched her process that, waiting for the recognition that always came. "Or I was until 3 days ago when I testified against my own club to the feds." Ilara's eyes widened. "You're a rat, snitch, dead man walking. Pick your term." Bitterness crept into his voice despite his best efforts. "They had me called on a weapons charge, 25 to life. My lawyer cut a deal, testify against the leadership. Walk free under witness protection." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Except I don't trust the feds any more than I trust the club, so I ran. To here. To the one place my father left me that the club never knew about. Or so I thought." He gestured toward the window. "That was Snake. One of my brothers. Which means, somehow, somewhere, there's a leak." Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. Then Ilara moved, crossing the room in deliberate steps until she stood before him. She didn't sit, just looked down at him with those impossibly green eyes and said, "I was a forensic accountant for the FBI." Of all the things Garrett expected, that wasn't one of them. "Was? Until I discovered my entire team was dirty." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Garrett could hear the pain underneath. "We were investigating a trafficking ring, international, billions of dollars moving through shell companies. I found the pattern, traced the money." She paused, swallowing hard. "And then I found my supervisor's name in the transfer records. Jesus, I copied everything, every file, every transaction, put it on a drive and ran." She pulled the blanket tighter. "They've been hunting me for 4 months, not to arrest me, to silence me." Garrett let that sink in. A rat and a whistleblower, hiding in the same cabin in the middle of nowhere. The universe had either a cruel sense of humor or a twisted sense of poetry. "So we're both ghosts," he said quietly. "Trying to be." Ilara finally sat, perching on the edge of the couch like she might need to bolt at any moment. "But if they found this place, if your people and my people are out there looking, then we're running out of time." Garrett leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "How long until you think they come back? Depends on if they're certain we're here. Tonight might have been reconnaissance, confirmation." She was thinking like an analyst, Garrett realized. Cool, logical, breaking down the threat into manageable pieces. He'd done the same thing 1,000 times in club meetings, planning runs and raids. "If they're smart, they'll wait until we think we're safe, then hit us when our guard is down. 48 hours, maybe less." They looked at each other across the firelight, and something shifted in the air between them. Some unspoken understanding that they were in this together now, whether they liked it or not. Two broken people with ghosts at their backs, and nowhere left to run. "We should leave," Ilara said, but there was no conviction in it. "Where would we go? They found this place. They'll find whatever place we run to next." "So what do we do?" Garrett considered that. Every tactical bone in his body screamed to run, to keep moving, to never stop until you hit ocean or border or grave. But something else, something he'd thought died years ago, told him different. "We make a stand," he said. "Together. That's suicide. Maybe. He met her eyes. Or maybe it's the first smart thing either of us has done in months. Ilara was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Garrett's surprise, she laughed. Real laughter this time, bright and alive despite everything. You know what the really insane part is? What? I believe you. She shook her head, smile fading into something softer. I've been alone for so long I forgot what it felt like to have someone on my side. Yeah, Garrett felt something crack in his chest. Some wall he'd built so high he'd forgotten it was there. Me too. They stayed like that, separated by 5 feet of cabin floor and lifetimes of trauma, while the fire burned down and the rain softened to a whisper against the windows. Garrett found himself memorizing details he had no business memorizing. The way Ilara's hair caught the firelight, the small scar on her left hand, the way she worried her bottom lip when she was thinking. He'd known her for less than 3 hours. It felt like he'd been waiting for her his whole life. Dangerous. So goddamn dangerous. You should sleep, he finally said, his voice rougher than intended. I'll keep watch. Garrett, go, Ilara, please. He couldn't look at her anymore. If he looked at her, he'd do something stupid, something that would shatter whatever fragile alliance they'd built. You're safe tonight, I promise you that. She stood slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. For a moment, he thought she might argue, might push back against his suddenly rough tone. Instead, she crossed to him, knelt down so they were eye level, and placed her hand over his, the one with split knuckles and scars that told stories he wished he could forget. Thank you, she whispered, for not running, for staying. Then she was gone, moving back up the stairs like a ghost, leaving Garrett alone with the fire and the rain and the terrible, beautiful feeling blooming in his chest that felt too much like hope. He stayed there until dawn, gun in hand, watching the door, watching over her, and knowing with absolute certainty that he'd burn this whole mountain down before he let anyone hurt her. The sun rose through the pines like a blade, cutting the darkness into ribbons of gold and shadow. Garrett hadn't slept, couldn't. Every sound outside, every branch cracking, every animal moving through the underbrush, sent his hand to his gun and his heart into his throat. By the time Ilara came downstairs, he'd consumed an entire pot of coffee and walked the perimeter of the cabin 6 times. She looked better than he felt, rested or at least doing a better job of hiding the exhaustion. She'd changed into jeans and a dark sweater, pulled her hair back into a practical braid. When she saw him sitting by the window, still in yesterday's clothes with a gun on his lap, something flickered across her face. You didn't sleep. Couldn't. Garrett's voice came out rough as gravel. Someone had to watch. Ilara moved to the kitchen, started another pot of coffee without speaking. They'd fallen into this rhythm without discussing it. Her taking care of the domestic things, him handling security. It should have felt wrong, antiquated, but it worked. Maybe because they both needed roles to hide behind, purposes to keep them from thinking too hard about what they were really doing. I've been thinking, she said as she poured him a fresh mug, about last night, about them finding this place. Yeah? Garrett accepted the coffee gratefully, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent heat up his arm that had nothing to do with the drink. It doesn't make sense. Your people, the club, they have resources, sure, but the FBI, we're good at hiding, we have entire divisions dedicated to witness protection. If they found me here, she sat down across from him, her analytical mind clearly working through possibilities. They would have hit harder, faster, not just circled and left. Garrett had been thinking the same thing. Unless they weren't sure, or unless they're not working alone. Their eyes met, and he saw the moment the same terrible realization hit her that had been growing in his mind all night. They're working together, Ilara breathed. The club and your FBI contacts. Makes sense, doesn't it? The club wants me dead for testifying. Your people want you dead for what you know. They pool resources, share intelligence. Garrett set his mug down with more force than necessary. We're not running from 2 separate threats, we're running from one. Which means nowhere is safe. The color had drained from Ilara's face. If they're sharing information, they have access to everything. Bank records, property deeds, surveillance. Hey! Garrett reached across the table, catching her hand before she could spiral. "We're still here, still breathing. That counts for something." She looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment, Garrett thought she might pull away. Instead, she turned her palm up, threading her fingers through his. The gesture was so simple, so intimate, it nearly broke him. "Garrett," she said quietly, "you need to understand something about the people hunting me. They're not just corrupt agents. They're connected to the trafficking ring I was investigating, and that ring—" She swallowed hard. "It's run by organized crime, international syndicates, people who make your club look like Boy Scouts. Jesus, Ilara, I'm the only person left who can connect them. Everyone else on my team either took money or ended up dead." Her voice cracked, but she held his gaze. "I have the evidence, all of it. Hidden where they can't find it, but if they find me first—" "They won't." Garrett squeezed her hand. "I won't let them. You can't promise that. Watch me." Something passed between them then, some current of understanding that went deeper than words. Garrett saw it in her eyes, the moment she stopped seeing him as just another criminal, another threat. The moment she saw him as a man, damaged, dangerous, but real, and he saw her, not as a liability or a complication, but as something precious he couldn't afford to lose. The air in the cabin grew thick, charged. Ilara's pulse jumped in her throat, visible even from across the table. Garrett's own heart was hammering so hard, he was certain she could hear it. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Worst I've ever had." Neither of them moved. The coffee grew cold between them. Outside, birds started their morning songs, oblivious to the danger circling closer with every passing hour. Then Ilara stood, and Garrett's heart sank, thinking she was running. Running from him, from this, from whatever was building between them that neither could name. But she didn't go far. Just rounded the table, stood before him, and reached out to touch his face with trembling fingers. "I don't even know you," she said, but there was no conviction in it. "I know." Garrett turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm. The kiss was chaste, reverent, and it sent fire through his veins. "Doesn't seem to matter, does it?" "No." Her thumb traced his jawline, learning the shape of him. "It really doesn't." He should have pulled away, should have reminded them both that they were running for their lives, that this was survival, not salvation, that whatever they were feeling was just adrenaline and proximity, and fear dressed up as something more. But when Ilara leaned down, when her breath ghosted across his lips, Garrett was lost. The kiss started gentle, questioning. Her lips soft against his, tasting like coffee and courage and something sweet he couldn't name. Then she made a small sound in the back of her throat, and gentle shattered into desperate. Garrett stood, pulling her against him, one hand fisting in her hair while the other splayed across her lower back, holding her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. She matched him, met him. Her hands found the collar of his jacket, pulling him closer, deeper, like she could crawl inside his skin and hide there from the world that wanted them both dead. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ilara pressed her forehead to his and laughed, breathless and disbelieving. "We're insane," she said, completely. Garrett's hands trembled against her back. 20 years in the club, and he'd never felt anything like this. Never wanted to protect something so fiercely it physically hurt. "They're going to kill us." "Probably. And you're okay with that?" Garrett pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "If I'm going to die, Ilara, I'd rather do it standing with you than running alone." Her breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "That's the most romantic and horrifying thing anyone's ever said to me." "Yeah, well," Garrett started to respond, but the words died as sound cut through the morning air. Engines, multiple, coming fast up the mountain road. They broke apart instantly, training and instinct snapping them back into survival mode. Garrett grabbed his gun and the go-bag he'd prepared during the night. Ilara was already moving toward the loose floorboard, where he'd seen her hide something the night before. The evidence, he realized. The drive that could bring down an empire. "Back door," Garrett ordered. "Now." But Ilara froze at the window, her face going absolutely white. "Garrett, that's not your people." He moved to her side, looked out and felt his blood turn to ice. 6 black SUVs, federal plates, and leading them, stepping out of the first vehicle with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you held all the cards, was a man in a suit Garrett recognized from his own dealings with the FBI, Agent Marcus Webb, Ilara's former supervisor. The man whose name was all over those financial records, and standing right beside him, shaking his hand like they were old friends, was Snake. The club and the feds, together, just like they'd feared. "Out," Garrett said, his voice cold and controlled. "Back door into the woods now." "But Ilara, move!" She grabbed the drive and they ran. Out the back door into the pines, with gunfire already starting to crack behind them, and voices shouting orders that promised nothing but blood and death, and the end of whatever fragile thing they'd found in that cabin. They ran, and Garrett made a vow with every step. He'd die before he let them take her. He'd burn the whole world down first. They made it 2 miles into the forest before Garrett realized they couldn't keep running forever. Ilara was strong, stronger than he'd given her credit for, but she wasn't built for this. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, her face pale with exertion. Blood stained her jeans where she'd fallen once, catching herself on sharp rocks. Behind them, he could hear dogs. They'd brought fucking tracking dogs. "Garrett," Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. "I can't. I know." He pulled her behind a massive pine, both of them collapsing against the trunk. His mind was racing, cataloging options, calculating odds. None of them were good. "Listen to me. There's a ravine about a quarter-mile east, runs parallel to a service road. If you can make it there." "No." Ilara grabbed his jacket, her green eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. "Don't you dare." "They want me dead, Ilara. You they want alive, at least until they get that drive. If I lead them away, then you die, and they still come after me." She shook her head violently. "I'm not losing you, not like this, not when—" Her voice broke. Garrett cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't seem to know she was crying. "This was always how it was going to end for me. I made my choices, lived my life. But you—" His throat tightened. "You deserve better than dying in these woods. I deserve you." The words came out raw, honest, stripping away every defense she'd built. "However long that is, even if it's only another hour." God, she was going to kill him. Not the club, not the FBI, her. This woman who'd somehow crept past every wall he'd ever built in the span of 36 hours and made him feel things he'd thought died with his capacity for redemption. "Ilara!" The bark exploded beside his head before he heard the shot. Garrett threw himself over her, covering her body with his as bullets ripped through the forest around them. He fired back blind, 3 quick shots toward the sound, and heard a scream. One down, at least. "Go!" He pushed her ahead of him, providing cover as they ran. More gunfire, voices shouting coordinates. The dogs getting closer, their baying echoing through the trees like harbingers of death. They broke through the tree line into a clearing, and Garrett's heart sank. Cliff edge, 60-foot drop to rocks and rapids below. No time to backtrack, no time for anything except the impossible choice bearing down on them with guns and dogs, and men who'd already decided how this story ended. Ilara reached the edge, looked down, and turned back to him with something like apology in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, "for bringing this into your life." "Don't." Garrett grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the edge. "Don't you dare apologize for being the best thing that's happened to me in 20 years. Figures emerged from the trees, 6 of them. Snake in the lead, his old brother wearing a smile that promised slow death and suffering. Behind him, Agent Webb, pristine in his Fed suit, looking at Ilara like she was a problem he was about to solve permanently. "End of the line, Cross," Snake called out. His gun was trained on Garrett's chest, but his eyes kept flicking to Ilara. "You always were too stupid to know when to quit." "Yeah, well," Garrett positioned himself between Snake and Ilara, "never was good at taking orders." "Give us the girl and the drive and we'll make it quick," Webb said, his voice oily with false reason. "You can die with some dignity at least." "Dignity?" Ilara laughed, sharp and bitter. She stepped out from behind Garrett, holding up the small drive. "You want to talk about dignity? You trafficked children, Marcus, sold them like property. made millions while pretending to hunt the monsters you worked for. And you think offering us a quick death somehow makes you the good guy? Webb's face hardened. You self-righteous little bitch. You think anyone cares? You think the truth matters? I've got 6 witnesses here who'll swear you died resisting arrest. That crosshair went down fighting. 2 more criminals off the streets. Except we're not going down. Garrett's hand found Ilara's, squeezed once. Are we? She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw understanding, saw trust, saw love wrapped in terror and defiance, and the kind of courage that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose. No, she said softly, we're not. Take them, Webb ordered. The men advanced. Garrett fired, once, twice, dropping 2 before the rest found cover, but there were too many. Always too many. He felt impact, white-hot pain blooming in his shoulder, heard Ilara scream his name, felt himself falling. No, not falling. Ilara had him, her arm around his waist, dragging him back from the men who wanted them dead, back toward the cliff edge where water roared over rocks 60 feet below. Trust me, she whispered in his ear. With my life, he managed through the pain, then jump. And they did. They jumped together, hands locked, bodies tangled, falling through air that screamed past them like the universe itself was trying to tear them apart. Garrett had time for one thought before they hit the water, that if he was going to die, at least he was dying holding the woman he loved. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Cold hit like a physical blow, water closing over them, dragging them down and down and down. Garrett's shoulder screamed agony. His vision darkened at the edges. But Ilara's hand never left his. Even as the current grabbed them, spinning them through rapids that should have killed them both, she held on. They surfaced 100 yards downstream, gasping, choking alive. Barely. Swim, Garrett managed. The bank. They made it somehow, crawling onto muddy shore on hands and knees, retching up river water and blood. Behind them, Garrett could hear shouting. They'd be coming, tracking them along the bank. We have to move, Ilara said, but Garrett could see the way she was shaking. Hypothermia. Shock. They wouldn't last the night like this. There's a ranger station, he gasped. 2 miles south. If we can make it, we will. Ilara helped him stand, took most of his weight as they stumbled into the trees. Together. We make it together or not at all. But Garrett knew the math, knew how this ended. His shoulder was bad, real bad, bleeding too much, slowing them down. Every mile they made would be one more chance for their hunters to close the gap, to finish what they'd started. They made it a mile before his legs gave out, just folded under him like puppet strings cut. Ilara caught him, lowered him against a tree, and he saw the moment she understood. No, she said. No, Garrett, you're fine. You're going to be fine. We just need... Go! He forced the word out. The drive. Get it to someone you trust. Burn them all down, Ilara. Make it mean something. I'm not leaving you. You have to. He cupped her face with his good hand, memorizing every detail in the dying light. You have to survive, please. Let me do this one good thing. Ilara was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. You are not dying in these woods. I won't let you. Not your choice, sweetheart. Like hell it's not. She pressed her lips to his, desperate, claiming a promise and a prayer and a demand all at once. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce. You don't get to decide you're done. You don't get to play martyr and leave me. We survived together, Garrett Cross. That's the deal. Ilara, but she was already moving, ripping fabric from her own shirt, binding his shoulder with hands that shook but never faltered. That ranger station, 2 miles, we're going to make it, both of us. And then we're going to burn every single one of them to the ground. She met his eyes. You hear me? Garrett wanted to argue, wanted to tell her the truth, that he was bleeding out, that 2 miles might as well be 20, that loving her was the best and worst thing he'd ever done, because now he had something to lose that mattered more than his own life. But he looked at her face, at the determination there, at the way she refused to accept that this was the end, and felt something shift in his chest. Hope. Goddamn hope. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Together. She smiled through her tears, and they stood, stumbled forward into the darkening woods. Behind them the dogs grew closer, but ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was a ranger station. Was safety, was a chance, was a future that felt, for the first time in Garrett's life, like something worth fighting for. The ranger station materialized through the rain like a mirage, small, wooden, dark. But it had walls and a door, and it wasn't the forest where men with guns were hunting them like animals. Ilara kicked the door open, no time for finesse, and dragged Garrett inside. He'd lost consciousness twice on the trek, his weight getting heavier with each step, blood loss turning his skin grey. She'd kept him moving through sheer force of will, talking to him constantly, refusing to let him slip away into the quiet that wanted to claim him. "Stay with me," she commanded, lowering him to the floor. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the flashlight she'd found in the station. "Garrett, Garrett, look at me." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Made it." "Yeah." Her laugh came out half-sob. "We made it." There was a medical kit, thank God, thank everything holy, mounted on the wall. Ilara ripped it open. Her 4 months of watching training videos and medical procedures during her time in hiding, suddenly the most important education she'd ever received. Pressure, stop the bleeding, monitor for shock. She cut away Garrett's shirt and her stomach lurched. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good, but he'd lost so much blood, too much. "Talk to me," she said as she worked, hands steady now that she had purpose. "Tell me about your bike. You never told me about your bike." 1968 Harley. His voice was thready, but he was trying, fighting to stay present. "Rebuilt her myself. Every piece. Took 3 years. "What color?" "Matte black, chrome exhaust." A ghost of a smile. "She's beautiful." "Like you." Ilara pressed gauze to the wound, watching it bloom red. "You're beautiful, you know that." "That's the blood loss talking." "No." She met his eyes. "It's not, it's me. Telling you. You're beautiful and brave and stupid for coming into my life and making me care about you." "Sorry." But he wasn't. She could see it in his face. "Don't be." She taped the bandage, knowing it was temporary at best. He needed a hospital, surgery. Things she couldn't give him in this abandoned station in the middle of nowhere. "I'm not." Garrett's hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "The drive. Where is it?" "Safe." She'd tucked it in her bra, the only place she knew wouldn't get lost or damaged in the water. "I'm going to use the radio. Call for help." "No." His grip tightened. "They're monitoring frequencies. You call anyone, Webb will know. He'll be here before real help arrives." Ilara knew he was right, hated that he was right. "Then what?" "We wait. Dawn, then you go, find a phone, make the call from somewhere safe. And leave you here. Better one of us makes it than neither." She wanted to scream, wanted to shake him, wanted to go back in time and never step foot in that cabin, never look at him with those damned green eyes, never fall in love with a man who kept trying to die for her. "I'm so tired," she whispered instead, "of good men thinking they're not worth saving." Garrett's eyes glistened. "Ilara!" The door exploded inward. Snake stood framed in the opening, gun raised, soaked and furious. Behind him, 3 more club members fanned out. No Webb. Just bikers. Just brothers who'd decided blood oaths meant less than revenge. "Touching," Snake sneered. "Real touching. But it's over, Cross." Garrett tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him. Too weak, too damaged. Ilara moved in front of him instinctively, putting herself between him and the guns. "Don't," Garrett rasped. "Ilara, don't." "Shut up." She kept her eyes on Snake. "You want him. You go through me first." Snake laughed. "Little girl, I don't have time for your hero complex. We came for Cross. You're just collateral damage." "Then you'd better make sure your aim is good," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the terror screaming through her veins. "Because I'm not moving." For a moment, something flickered in Snake's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Then it hardened back into cold certainty. Have it your way." He raised the gun, and Ilara closed her eyes, waiting for the impact that would end everything, and heard sirens instead. Multiple vehicles, close, getting closer. Snake's head whipped toward the sound, confusion and anger warring on his face. "What the hell? I called them," Garrett said from behind Ilara, his voice weak but triumphant. "Before we left the cabin, used the burner, told them everything, where to find the evidence, what Webb was doing. They've had 36 hours to move on it." Snake's gun swung back to Garrett. "You're lying." "Am I?" Garrett's laugh was wet, pained. "Check your phone, brother. See if any of your contacts are answering. See if Webb's still taking your calls." The sirens were deafening now. Lights flashed through the windows, red, blue, white. Vehicles screeching to stops, doors slamming. Voices shouting orders that had the weight of law behind them. Snake looked at his brothers, at the cops surrounding the building, at Garrett, bleeding on the floor but wearing a grin that said he'd already won. "You son of a bitch," Snake breathed. "You actually did it. You burned us all." "Just the ones who deserved it," Garrett said. Then softer, "I'm sorry, man. I really am. But I couldn't let them hurt her. You understand that, don't you? Brotherhood's one thing, but love—" His eyes found Ilara's. "Love's something else entirely." For a long moment, Snake just stood there. Then slowly he lowered his gun, raised his hands. Behind him, his brothers did the same, recognizing the math, seeing the inevitable, with the clarity of men who'd been on the wrong side of law their entire lives. The feds poured in, real feds, not Webb's corrupted crew. And in the chaos of arrests and rights being read and bodies being secured, Ilara dropped to her knees beside Garrett. "You called them," she said, wonder in her voice. "When?" "Before we ran, used the emergency system in the cabin. Figured if we were going down, we might as well take them all with us." He touched her face. "But I wasn't planning on going down. Not anymore. Not when I had you to come back to. You magnificent idiot." She was crying and laughing and pressing her face into his good shoulder. "You brilliant, stupid, perfect—" "Ma'am." A paramedic appeared beside them, medical bag in hand. "We need to get him stabilized. Can you step back?" Ilara didn't want to, wanted to hold on and never let go. But Garrett squeezed her hand once, a promise, and she moved aside, watching as they worked on him with practiced efficiency. Watching as they loaded him onto a stretcher, attached IVs, called out vitals that sounded bad, but not terminal. Not terminal. He was going to live. They were going to live. An older man in a Fed jacket approached her. Grey hair, kind eyes, badge that read, "Assistant Director." "Ms. Hayes, I'm Director Morrison. We've been looking for you for 4 months." When Agent Cross's tip came through. "Agent Cross?" Ilara blinked. Morrison smiled. "The deal he cut with us before he ran wasn't just testify and disappear. It was testify, help us build a case against the corruption in our own ranks and earn his way into a new life." He nodded toward the stretcher carrying Garrett. "He's been feeding us information for 6 months. The cabin, the evidence you gathered, it all gave us what we needed to move on Webb and his network." Ilara felt the world tilt. He knew. This whole time, he knew. He knew he was walking into a trap, knew they'd come for him. But he also knew you were the key to bringing them all down. Morrison's expression softened. "He risked everything to protect you, to make sure your evidence didn't die with you in these woods." She looked at Garrett being loaded into the ambulance and felt something break open in her chest. Not pain, not fear, something bigger. Something that felt like the future unfolding in front of her in ways she'd stopped believing were possible. "Can I ride with him?" she asked. "Of course." Morrison gestured toward the ambulance. "You're both going to need to give statements, but that can wait. For now," he smiled, "go be with him." Ilara ran. 6 months later, the house wasn't much, small, tucked away on the Oregon coast where the pines met the ocean, and the world felt like it ended in all the right ways. But it was theirs. Bought with witness protection money and new identities, and the kind of freedom that came from watching your enemies go to prison for life. Ilara stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the water gold, and felt Garrett's arms wrap around her from behind. He moved quieter now, more carefully. The shoulder would never be the same, but he was alive. They both were. And in the end, That was all that mattered. "You're thinking too hard again," he murmured against her hair. "Just remembering." She leaned back into his warmth. "That night, the cabin, the way you looked at me like I was something worth dying for. You were. You are." Garrett turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her waist. "But I'm glad we found a third option. Living. Living together." He kissed her forehead. Big difference. It was. They'd spent the past 6 months learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with survival. Learning that Garrett hummed when he cooked breakfast, that Ilara talked in her sleep. That trauma didn't disappear just because the danger did, but it got easier when you had someone to carry it with you. Webb had gone down first. Life without parole, along with 17 other federal agents who'd been on his payroll. The trafficking ring had been dismantled, not destroyed. Evil was never that simple, but broken enough that it would take years to rebuild. Snake and the club members who'd hunted them were facing RICO charges that would keep them locked up for decades. And Garrett and Ilara, they were ghosts, new names, new lives, new chance at something neither had thought possible. "I saw you working on the bike today," Ilara said, tracing the scar on his shoulder through his shirt. "You getting restless?" "No." Garrett caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "Just wanted to make sure she still runs, in case we ever need to leave fast." "We won't." Ilara said it with certainty she'd earned. "They're all gone. We're safe." "I know." But his eyes held shadows that might never fully fade. Old habits. "I get it." She did. She still checked locks twice, still woke up reaching for the drive that now sat in an evidence locker in DC, its contents having brought down an empire. Still felt her heart race every time a black SUV drove past their little house on the coast. But it was getting better. They were getting better. "Hey!" Garrett cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You okay? Really?" "Yeah." Ilara smiled and meant it. "I really am. For the first time in maybe ever." "Good." He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promises they were finally in a position to keep. When he pulled back, his expression was serious. "I need to tell you something." Ilara's stomach tightened. "What?" "Morrison called. The last of the appeals got denied. It's over. Officially over." He squeezed her hands. "We're free, Ilara. For real this time." The breath she'd been holding for 6 months released all at once. "Free. Free." Garrett grinned, and she saw the man he might have been if life had been kinder. Young, unburdened, full of possibility. No more looking over our shoulders, no more wondering if today's the day they find us. Just life. Life. Ilara tested the word, found it fit better than she expected. "What do we do with that?" "Whatever we want." Garrett pulled her close, tucked her under his chin where she fit perfectly. "I was thinking we could start with breakfast, then maybe a ride up the coast, then—" He hesitated, vulnerable in a way that still surprised her. "Then maybe we talk about that thing we've been avoiding talking about." "What thing?" "The future, the real one, the one that doesn't involve running or hiding or waiting for the other shoe to drop." Ilara's heart stuttered. She pulled back to look at him. "What kind of future are you talking about, Garrett Cross?" He reached into his pocket, and for a moment, Ilara's world stopped spinning. When his hand emerged, it held a simple silver ring. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw attention. Just a band worn smooth like it had been carried a long time. "The kind where I stopped calling this house temporary," Garrett said quietly. "The kind where we plant roots and build something that lasts. The kind where," his voice cracked, "where I get to wake up next to you for the rest of my life and call you my wife." Tears blurred Ilara's vision. "That's not a question." "Isn't it?" But he was smiling, nervous and hopeful, and so completely stripped of armor she could see straight through to his heart. "Ilara Hayes, whatever your real name is, whatever names we end up with in the next life, will you marry me?" She kissed him instead of answering. Kissed him like she had in that cabin when bullets were flying and the world was ending. Kissed him like she had in the ranger station when she thought she'd lose him. Kissed him like she'd wanted to every moment since, but had been too afraid to believe they'd have the chance. When she finally pulled back, she was crying and laughing and holding his face between her hands. Yes, God, yes to all of it. The roots and the future and the rest of our lives, yes. Garrett slipped the ring on her finger, perfect fit, like it had been made for her. And then he was lifting her, spinning her, both of them laughing like children who'd just learned the world wasn't as dark as they'd thought. They'd paid the price, both of them. Paid it in blood and fear, and nights that felt like they'd never end. Paid it in the people they used to be, the lives they'd left behind, the innocence that could never be recovered. But they'd also made a promise to survive, to fight, to find each other in the darkness and hold on no matter what tried to tear them apart. And they'd kept it. As the sun set over the Pacific and the stars began to emerge, Garrett and Elara sat on their porch, her head on his shoulder, his hand in hers, and watched the world turn beautiful again. Not perfect. Never perfect. They'd both seen too much for that kind of naivety, but beautiful and theirs and enough, more than enough. I love you, Elara whispered into the gathering dark. Even though it's insane, even though we barely know each other, even though... I love you too, Garrett interrupted, and we've got the rest of our lives to figure out all the reasons why that makes perfect sense. She smiled against his shoulder. The rest of our lives, I like the sound of that. Yeah. Garrett pressed a kiss to her hair. Me too. Inside, the kettle whistled. Outside, the ocean sang its eternal song. And two people who'd been broken by different worlds found themselves somehow impossibly whole. The road behind them was forbidden,